What's going on YouTube, Kronos here, and welcome back to another PSO2 video. So divide quests have been out for a bit, and I've had some time to refamiliarize myself with how I usually tackle divide quests from a solo perspective. I figured it was a decent time to go ahead and toss together a quick tips video about how I solo divide, seeing as eventually we'll be getting the steps 31 through 35. Don't worry, not a ton changes there, other than some scaling and a few mechanics, but nonetheless I'll do my best to mention them as I remember. First off, while we do this solo, keep in mind your overall goal is to make it through to the end of each stage. Occasionally, RNG just won't be in your favor, and certain stages, depending upon your class choice, can become drastically unfair. The point of this video is to help mitigate those situations the best we possibly can. So divide quests are split into 5 stages, or ops as they're called on Global. We have Suppression Ops, where your objective is to take down a boss enemy. Eradication Ops, where you need to take down all enemies that spawn in the area. Infiltration Ops, which is described as halt virtual devices and escape. We'll go into more of that later. Resupply Ops, where our goal is simple: protect towers, collect crystals. And finally, the quote, last battle, our final objective. Simply put, defeat the final target. Now, each stage can have up to 3 buffs or debuffs for the player or enemy at random. I'd recommend pausing the video here so you can take a look at the different buffs and debuffs you can possibly get. It's worth noting that life damage negate means that when you die, you won't lose any lives from your life pool. This stays for the duration of the stage, and you can die as often as you like. You may end up leveraging this in a later stage that we're going to talk about. We're going to go over each stage individually, and I'm going to give you an idea of how I approach each of them. Oh, and before I forget, while you're solo on these stages, keep in mind that we do get what's called a solo buff or scaling buff. Depending upon the number of people in your party/area at specific points during the stage, your stats are buffed, in some cases pretty dramatically. I remember the exact number. I'm sure someone in the comments will post it, and I'll do my best to heart it so it floats up to the top. So let's get started with Suppression. This one's pretty simple. It's a big boss. You fight it. That's really about it. The trick to Suppression is knowing that around the minute and 30 seconds mark, you're going to get your solo scaling buff. That's when you really start dealing damage. Before then, in some cases, players opt to just ignore the boss, running to the opposite end of the room or just toying around with it while building resources. And the only other thing to note here is that on stages 1 through 30, adds spawn, and when they're killed, you get a PSC bonus that grants you extra attack damage, and that stacks with your solo scaling bonus. So yeah, when you see people hitting for those insane numbers in divide boss fights, that's solo scaling buff plus the attack buff. Now these stages are usually a free pass if you're confident in the boss you're fighting, but there are a few to look out for. Commonly you want to avoid Transmiser in the desert, the Spider Lady over in Harukatan, and Dorios. These bosses are known to super chip players down or just straight up one-shot them, so be careful. Next we have Eradication Ops, and these have a small nuance to them. So there are 2 types of enemies that spawn here: standard normal enemies that tend to be a bit tanky, and a secondary type of enemy that'll spawn with a specialized ring around them that when you kill them, they explode. You want to kill the ringed targets first as they blow up and blow up the other targets and kill them for you. Don't worry, these enemies blowing up don't do any damage to you, just other targets around them. And I'll be honest with you, this is easier said than done, so do the best you can. Small tip here, if you see a spawn of just the ring enemies and nothing else on the map, it usually means it's a chain reaction. Meaning you kill an enemy, and as that enemy dies, another set will spawn. Those enemies usually also have a ring around them. They die, blow up, kill the next set, and that's supposed to create a chain reaction. With the emphasis on usually. Sometimes this just doesn't work depending upon ping, so I'd keep an eye on the chain reactions as they go off, and just help them along the way if you need to. Mop up as many enemies as you can, and if you can get at least 75 out of 100, you'll get an S rank, which is more than enough. Now on to probably the most annoying of the set, Infiltration Ops. These can be a bit of a pain to solo. Basically, you're trying to fill a bar at the top of the screen as fast as you can. This can be done by either killing enemies or collecting crystals. At the start of the mission, you'll be told what is buffed, and it can be any of the things that I mentioned beforehand, being specific enemies or the crystals. Now, like I mentioned, Infiltration Ops are annoying, so some people just opt to skip these. As the stage starts, you can basically walk right back over to the teleporter, hit it, choose to leave, and it'll end the stage immediately. You'll get a C rank, but you'll move on to the next stage. But if your goal is to try to get the S rank here, which this stage is used for collecting medals in most cases, then here's what you're going to want to do. At the start, ideally you're going to want to avoid fighting enemies until you either hit a B rank or 1 minute and 30 seconds has passed. On this stage, either one of them will give you your solo buff, whichever comes first basically. In the meantime, while you're waiting for this, collect crystals. Quick tip, if you're a class that subs Phantom, you can get away with swapping your right ring to a flame short charge ring, and combined with Phantom subs faster cast times, you can get a full charge Sophoe type 0, super fast and for very low PP cost, that collects easily for you and moves quickly. The reason we want a Sophoe type 0 charge is because it basically makes a giant ring around you, and that ring hitting any of the crystals is going to collect them for you. Technically, you could use the same strat with Phantom main, however, they have access to a PA on Rod that places a giant ring around them. Take that alongside of being able to just quick cast Sophoe type 0 or Elzonde and they can collect just as fast, in reality faster. Like I mentioned earlier, any damage hitting the crystals will collect them, meaning you can also shoot them from a distance. So like I was saying, collect crystals for about the first minute and a half or till you get a B rank while you run past enemies. Trick is to get their attention and they'll follow you around the entire map. At the same time, you want to try to find the boss on the stage while you're at it. When you do get that solo buff, whether that be at 1 minute and 30 seconds or from collecting crystals, smash that boss and all of the ads around him. Remember, some classes are better at this than others, so leverage whatever you happen to be good at. Now, when you manage to mow down those enemies and that boss, start looking for the next one, while at the same time gathering devices and crystals along the way. You're basically going to repeat this the entire way all the way up to a maxed S rank, and hope along the way that you get devices for HP and damage, because at 3 minutes, you're going to start taking 60 damage ticks every second from Acid Rain. And yes, this does mess up Hero Boost and Etwil's Double Saber focus, so do the best you can here. Now if all goes as planned, by the time you hit that full S rank, your Dark Blast gauge should have filled up. If not, don't panic, just try to fight a couple of extra enemies, it should be fairly close to it. It's worth noting here that if you get the modifier on the stage Dark Blast gauge down, you're almost definitely not going to have your Dark Blast at this point, so you might as well just run out of here as soon as you can. Now you've got your S rank, you've got your Dark Blast, it's time to do a mad dash to find every other device you can. Get as many modules as you possibly can and get out of there, because at the 4 minute mark, you start to take damage ticks of 100 per second, and there's nothing that can be done to heal that back up. All healing is negated at this point. We basically Dark Blast here for a second HP pool that has really high, and Dark Blast has great movement. Basically you want to either pop Elder or Luther and get running. Remember earlier when I mentioned the Life Loft negated buff can be leveraged? Well, here's your chance to use it. Basically run around, even if you're dying, you're not losing lives, and pick up everything you possibly can. Every extra device you pick up is an extra box at the end, so don't throw away your run for them, but do your best to try to get what you can. A final note here is to keep an eye out for Dragon Altar version of the stage. The boss there is Catadran, and it sucks. However, if you're a tech user or have access to status effects, some of these bosses came with poison or burned. Basically, Catadran can be poisoned for 1 million damage ticks, which is really nice. Next on the docket, we have Resupply. Now, approached correctly, this one can be fairly easy. Enemies spawn every minute after the first 10 seconds. Ideally, what you want to do here is gather crystals when they spawn at the start. Quick tip, they don't spawn instantly, so stand around for a few seconds and then you'll see a couple crystals spawn around you. Usually this timer is given for basically non-solo runs for people to split up, and then they can spawn crystals or get the crystals that spawned in other areas. So keep an eye on your map, because after the first 10 seconds, the first wave of enemies are going to spawn. Your next focus is going to shift immediately to taking those enemies down. The faster they die, the faster you can go back to collecting crystals. Sometimes you can be a bit unlucky with the spawns here, where you essentially have to run across the map to go from tower spawn to tower spawn. Just do the best you can. Keep an eye out specifically for the Lumamech enemies, specifically the ones that are kind of triangular shaped. They tend to shred towers. If you see them spawn, they are your first priority. Take them down as soon as possible. Repeat this for the first 2 spawns, then go all out on crystal collecting and completely ignore the 3rd spawn of enemies. By the time you reach the 3rd wave, crystal spawns should be much bigger, so you can go hyper crystal collecting, and as soon as you hit full on the S rank, the stage is over and you're good to go. Usually dead ends have the highest concentration of crystals, so you want to do your best to go from one end to the other. And that's all there is to it for every single class, except Phantom. It is even easier for Phantoms to do this. Remember that thing I said about fighting enemies? Yeah, Phantoms don't do that. They can 100% skip enemies and just collect crystals with that rod-based shift PA that I mentioned beforehand. Crystals here again are collected when you hit them, so Phantom's giant ring that goes around them from that PA basically covers an entire hallway very easily. So the Phantom strat here is just collect crystals until the cow comes home. Don't stop at all, don't defend anything, and you'll basically be good to go. The only stage to be wary of this is Harukatan, as it basically sucks for everyone. The enemy types are pretty terrible, and the crystal density is even worse. And finally, we're on to our last stage, unironically dubbed Last Battle. Pretty good, right? Anyway, we just fight a boss here. Unlike the other stages, our solo buff is applied right at the start of the fight, so your goal is just to burn down the boss as fast as you can. As long as you burn down 75%, you'll get an S rank. Ideally, you'll want to kill them though. For stages 5 and 10, you'll basically always fight Exocor, or I believe his name on Global is Exegul. I'm probably still going to call him Exocor though. Make sure you break that little spot on his butt, that way you open up his weak spot for massive damage. Apparently also there's a strategy with Exocor where you can burn him for massive damage as well. However, I don't play tech classes, so I personally have never actually burned him. At stage 15, you can get a rare version of Exocor or Runa. Same thing applies for the rare spawn version of him. Just break the butt, get the weak spot open. Runa's a rare spawn here though, so you're usually going to get Exocor. On stage 20 and 25, you can get either of the two from before, but also Mitra added in. Again, the Runa and Mitra variants are a bit more rare for stage 20. However, at stage 25, very commonly you tend to get Runa. If you do get Exocor, it's a rarity. However, that's usually one that ends up getting sped run because it's the strongest version of Exocor, and it can tend to be a bit rough if you're not ready for him. At stage 30, you will always get Runa and Mitra. Well, Mitra dressed up as Shiva. Runa's pretty easy, just fight him as usual, dodge his attacks when they're coming at you. You're honestly best off having audio cues turned on, that way you can tell what attacks he's likely to do. For Mitra, you just want to be in front of her and slightly above her hitbox to ensure that you're not hitting the chair, you're actually hitting her. That chair takes severely reduced damage. And finally, at stage 35, you'll fight the real Shiva. I'm gonna let you guys figure that one out yourselves. Just be careful of her parry, if you know what I'm talking about. And that's it. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions below, or if there's any strats you personally would like to share, feel free to in the comments. A like on the video is much appreciated and absolves you of half your ad block guilt. As always, the other half is all by subscribing. Both are completely free and do help me out a ton. If you want to keep up with the content as it goes live, make sure to click on the bell icon to be notified of videos as they go up, as well as community posts. Or if you want to keep up with me over on Discord or follow me over on Twitter, you can get notifications via those two avenues. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Peace out.
There'll be no escape.